So welcome everyone to the new edition of the Prodependence webinar. And we're so glad that Debbie McRae has stepped in. Kim Buck used to do these, I was just mentioning. And Kim Buck has co-authored the new Prodependence book that will be coming out through Routledge Publishing, which will help train other therapists to do that. That's long. Now I'm going to go back to why Debbie's here. So Debbie has been working with Kim. She was an early adopter of this, and so she has been doing this work, from the onset. And so she has graciously, stepped into the space, and she and Matt Wheeler, who's a colleague of hers, will be alternating the Friday afternoon spot. Note that after the time change on November 7th, the time will shift to 1:30 Pacific time, so it will be all noted. But do make a note of that. But I'm really grateful to be here with you, Debbie. I'm thankful for those of you joining. Again, she's going to talk for a bit, but we have one question in there, but please put your questions in. She's a talented therapist, but again, from the partner standpoint, if you're the person struggling with addiction, it's really good to understand all aspects of this too. So this isn't just for betrayed partners. I hope we've got everyone here. So anyway, I will be quiet. Debbie, welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I was just going to give you a little more background on how Kim got me involved. I consider Kim Buck one of those mentors that I have in my life. And when I first started working with Kim, she was struggling with the codependency approach and had introduced me to prodependency, and then came to me and said, hey, I am working on actually applying it. Would you be willing to run a group? And she basically handed me her first rough draft of her book that had all of the different approaches in that little shift, right? From the codependency lens to the prodependency lens. And so it was really fun for me to take the first group through and to go back to her and say, this is really working, and here's what I'm seeing, and to also tweak it and say, hey, we struggled with this a little bit, let's talk it through. So I'm very passionate about the work because I see the application of this in real life, and just how it is such a wonderful way to assist our betrayed partners, in dealing with that attachment disorder and that intimacy disorder that occurs when we're dealing with someone who's got a love addiction or sex addiction or a porn addiction or a drug or an alcohol addiction, whatever it is. Just to give you a little background on me, 20 years ago, I went through my own situation very similar to those that I just mentioned. And there was nothing out there other than going to a therapist and them telling me, Debbie, you're part of the problem. Here's what you need to do. So I'd leave the therapist's office and I'd go do it. And I'd try to step back in and to the situation, and it didn't help. And I found that the more I tried, the worse I got. And fortunately, I worked really, really hard. And over about a 5 to 7 year period, I was able to heal, but it was tough. And so again, coming back around to Kim, when she shared this with me, I went, oh, I wish I would have had that. So that's just a little bit of background on me. And so I really relate to the women who come into my practice, come into group, and they are really in a state where they are dealing with a lot of really heavy things. So one of the things that I noticed right away is there's a lot of confusion. And so we're trying to help them in that moment to kind of figure out. I've noticed that my partners either come in with a situation where maybe it's been ongoing, right? Again and again and again. So they've either had an initial discovery or disclosure, and then they have repeated. I've even had I had one woman who was married 40 plus years, getting ready to celebrate, a really significant anniversary, and weeks before found out for the very first time, that this had been going on for the entirety of her marriage. And so we see that it can happen, and we can, even as a partner, start to feel like we're doing better and something's going to hit us again. So I like that the angle that we kind of look at it like you're in crisis. It's not about you've got a pathology and there's something wrong with you and we've got to fix what's wrong, or going right to the trauma, because obviously there's trauma or childhood trauma that's contributing to this. So I really like to look at what can we do right now to help you feel better. And so, Tammy, I don't know what you do in your practice to help the women immediately when they're dealing with a crisis, whether it's from an initial disclosure, repeated discovery. But I find I just go to some of the basic things that help, and they help pretty significantly.
So share what some of those basic things would be, like that, so somebody comes in and they are in crisis. What would be things that could be immediately practical tools to do to just help in the moment?
And this can be applied at any time. You feel like all of a sudden that solid footing maybe you've gotten for just a moment isn't so solid anymore. The first thing I like to teach my clients is about awareness. And we really focus on that not only in individual therapy, but also in our group. And so what that means is I teach them about when we're in crisis or under this, this stress that's occurring in the relationship, that our brains are actually even involved, that it's no fault of theirs that they might be reacting the way that they are. And so I really talk about that window of tolerance and the fact that you're under so much stress, right? The brain all of a sudden goes, hey, I can't handle this. I only have about this much I can handle. And now I've got to go to that part of my brain, that fight, flight, or freeze part of my brain, that primitive part. And I've got to operate from there. So a lot of it is about what can we do to help calm your system down and what's going to work. I find too that with my partners that even just having knowledge can help increase that window of tolerance. Share with me what's going on. Why do I feel so bad? Why do I feel this way? And as I go through and I explain it, I find as their awareness increases, some of that stress comes down. Is it normal for me to feel this way? Is it normal for me to feel maybe like I can't sleep at all and I'm not eating and I've got anxiety that's so bad. I'm waking up in the middle of the night with my heart, just pounding. Is it normal for me to feel like I just want to numb out and not do anything and shut down? I've had some clients come back months later and say, I just feel so bad because when I first discovered everything, I literally went to bed and didn't get out of bed for months. And I just, my kids, thank goodness there was food and my partner stepped up and helped take care of them. But, now they understand it's really their brain trying to protect them. So we're working on increasing their window of tolerance. We've got to be really aware of what's going on in me internally. The other thing I work on is just that mindfulness piece, because what our brain wants to do when we're under and in this crisis is it wants to go back to the past and think about all of the things. So if I'm in a relationship and all of a sudden discovery comes out of the clear blue or disclosure does, I'm going back and I'm thinking about how did I miss it? What didn't I see? What didn't I notice? And we can get so stuck in that. Or my brain likes to project out into the future. So I'm constantly thinking about, well, what if this happened? What if? And I'm spending so much energy outside of what's happening in the present moment. And it's really only the present moment that we can really control, right? And so that mindfulness comes in the form of, I teach the halts, right? Am I hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or stressed? And we go through, what are some things you can do? We also talk about the breathing. So I do everything from meditative breathing to some of the more what we would consider more of the trauma approach type breathings that literally works physiologically with your body to calm the system down. And then I really challenge my my clients to do daily meditative practices. And what the research shows that 8 weeks of 15 to 20 minutes a day of meditation strengthens the connection to that front part of our brain, right? That prefrontal cortex where we have emotional regulation comes from that part of our brain. So I tell my clients oftentimes that's the biggest bang for your buck, is starting with some of that meditation and that breathing. The other thing I want them to do is I want them to start doing self-care. That's really important. And oftentimes you get lost in it because the focus for the partner is, I'm now focusing on my addict partner and I'm trying to help them, and I want to make sure they're doing what they need to do and that they're getting help that they need to get. And it is easy to get caught up in that. And so oftentimes we forget, right, to take care of ourselves. And I use the analogy all the time, and it gets old, but my husband happens to be a pilot, and we know the instructions are, right, if there's problems in the plane, you put your mask on first before you help anybody else. And I will literally use that analogy, and I see a light bulb go off in the partner's, eyes, like, oh, that makes sense. So I focus on them really doing what we call dailies. We call that, in our practice, just focusing on, okay, taking care of my physical body. What's a couple things I can do? What am I already doing? Plug it in. What can I do to feed my spirit? Can I go out and be in nature? Can I join a webinar like this where I'm learning, right? And kind of feeding and, feeling better after I hear it. Can I spend time journaling? That's another great way, very therapeutic and very healing. What can I do emotionally for myself, right? Because I need to be in tune with, what do I need right now in this moment? And then lastly, what can I do relationally? And again, going back to research, we show that one of the quickest ways to help regulate, right, to feel better, is healthy human connection. And so again, I tell my clients, that's another big bang for your buck. Go find somebody, find that trusted person that can, we call that hold space, right? I can sit and listen with you. I can join with you with empathy, and I keep it to myself. I am trustworthy and safe, and there's no judgment. And I find that if my clients consistently do that, they start to feel better pretty quickly, even if it's maybe after their partner's had a slip, or if it's they've had another discovery, or they just wake up and they're having a bad day and they can't get out of the past. That if they return back to those basics, as simple as it sounds, it's one of the best things they can do for themselves. Do you have any ideas that you do?
Well, so I'm not a therapist, so
Okay.
I do all of this stuff on
Yes.
sexandrelationshiphealing.com, but I talk to so many people, and like I have seen the fight or flight. I was talking to someone and they got a call and they were concerned that it was an emergency. She was vacant. She like I could see it. I've never had such a moment where I could see it in her eyes that she could not function. And I thought, wow, that's a really powerful representation. And I've remembered that because I was like, that's what happens when we get these trauma things. And so the being mindful, being in the moment and going, I have no control, for me in recovery, the Trinity Prayer was a really big thing because it was
Yes.
a constantly, I would use it as a mantra. I would say it over and over again. And I would remind myself, I have no control over anyone else. All I have control over is my actions and reactions. And so everybody can be doing everything completely wrong according to me. And I can either, be a hot mess all over the place, or I can go, I get to choose how I act and react in this. And that was really a powerful thing. But so my point about that though is, partners that are seeking safety and thinking, if I just control his, and we're using heteronormative, so but that's just for ease of, addiction spans everything, partners, it doesn't matter. So but just for pronoun ease, please understand. So but if a partner is going, well, if I just if I control the space, if I set up things, then he'll be safe and then we'll be okay. And you completely understand where that's coming from, but you can't control. Nothing you did or didn't do is going to make him do or not do, I mean, and for an addict, their brain is offline. All the things that you shared for a partner are applicable for an addict. If we're mindful, if we're in the moment, if we're paying attention, that's how we can change. And the good news is we can change You mentioned support. We have multiple drop-in groups for partners. We have multiple groups for addicts, including female addicts and male partners. So we have structure in place so that people can join and get connected to safe people. Unfortunately, and I'm sure I've heard too often too, where somebody tells somebody, because they think they're a trusted person to share what's going on at home, and the next thing you know, it's being flipped back at them. It's gone through the family or whatever. So it is hard to find trusted people, but it is why we created, the drop-in groups on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, so that, there's a moderator for each of those. There's someone holding the space, and it, so you can find other peers to help you on this journey. We have the Couples Healing from Betrayal work group that starts next week. And that's a safe space for couples to go get information and process some, communication to how do we communicate? We're in chaos. How do we do this differently?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother topic we can talk about sometime, because I find that is really important. We have to address that at some point. We have to. But you make a good point that I want to come back around to, and that is, I love the fact that there's drop-in groups, because I know when I went through my betrayal, I never knew from one day to the next if I was going to have a good day or a bad day. And in that moment, where can I turn? Because like I said, when my window of tolerance is really narrow and I've gone to that limbic part of my brain, I'm in survival, I can't do a very good job of problem solving in that moment. And so just knowing, I'll tell my clients, hey, let's make a list. Let's bullet point just some simple things that you can do. Because when you're in it, like you said, when you saw that person with the vacant eyes, it's really hard to think, okay, what can I do? And so if you can just pick up a phone and call somebody, or if you have the ability to make it to a group, I guarantee you're going to feel better, and you're going to feel better quicker. And so, and a lot of what I'm basing this off is a lot of the research from Stephen Porges, right? In his window of tolerance and hyperarousal, which is my body gets amped up, hypoarousal, I want to shut down. And what they found through the research really helps us to have that emotional regulation.
Yeah. And so that person, vacant eyes, we were at a restaurant, and she ended up, all she could order was mashed potatoes. So she had mashed potatoes. She couldn't order. She's mashed potatoes. And I said, do you want something else? Couldn't do it. I mean, it was such
shows you.
And no shame for her. It was just a reaction, but it's been very much in my mind with that. I love what you shared about, the intentionality. So I do start my morning with a meditation. I go out and run, or hike or something. So I go do something, and it's like all of those things. And I thought, and regardless of, I've shared this before, I really struggled with COVID. I'm a social person, and being completely disconnected was really challenging for me, and I was emotionally dysregulated in it. And fortunately, I have a very good therapist and some good friends that are, and they gave me some tools, including, some apps. And like I got off the news. That was incredibly, like, I quit letting the negative stuff come in first thing. I made sure that I was doing the good things, so I've got some apps for meditations and grounding and things like that. And then I go for a run, and I'm be out in nature. I have to be intentional about seeing what's out there. My background is one of my pictures. I mean, I made a choice to be intentional about those things. And that sets my day up in a very different way than when negative stuff was just coming at me. So and it doesn't mean negative stuff isn't going to come at you, but man, if I've got, like you said, if I've got a little more bandwidth for the tolerance for, I'm going to have a little more executive brain to be able to handle the situation.
That's right. I teach my groups about routines and rituals, and this was really reinforced when I was at a seminar listening to somebody give a presentation, and she was doing her PhD, working on her PhD in women's studies. And so she went to an African village, because here they live under a lot of stress. You think about it, just even getting food, and just, financially they're in poverty, and yet they're such a happy people, grounded, right? Based on what she saw. And so what she did was she gave them Polaroid cameras, or disposable cameras,
Mhm.
right? And said, just document your life. I want to see what you're doing. And then she collected all the data and looked at it. And what she discovered was that these women that she studied had these routines and rituals that created for them a sense of connectedness, community, security, because there was repetitiveness. And so it was everything from walking down to the watering hole with a basket on their head to get water and visiting there, to coming home and their family working together to create a meal, to cacao ceremonies, to, right, the routines and the rituals. And so I love that idea of, we've got to be very intentional. It's easier to plan ahead that it's going to happen, right? So I'm going to increase my bandwidth or my window of tolerance than it is that once I'm in it to try to increase it. It takes more work. It does.
Yeah, and it's less likely to be successful because it's just, what's the saying? Failure to have a plan is failing to plan, or it's something like that. So when we're talking, to betrayed partners and couples and things like that, it's like, what is your plan? Because this is going to happen. So if you can have a conversation, not in the heat of the moment, but like if we can have a plan and understand, again, I think that's part of healthy boundaries and creating safety, then if everybody's on the same page with it, then when the inevitable or the whatever happens, then you have a plan, and you go, oh, I remember I had the plan. So
yes, whether it's brief bullet points or I'm sitting down with my partner, and control, we talked a little bit about that a minute ago, and that sense of, I have no control over my partner's choices, especially when they're in their addiction. That is a hard place to be. I don't know about you, but I like control. I like to know what's going to happen in my life. And I had to learn at times to surrender that, right? But my point is that we can kind of set it up so we can still feel safe, even though there's a sense of there's no control in this moment, which feels ironic, right?
it is a paradox. Yeah,
It is paradoxical.
Yeah, I can't control any of that. All I can do is control me. What do I need to do in the moment? I can do a grounding. I can sense that my feet are on the ground right now. I mean, I can look out whatever I can do, but I can be intentional about that, because my natural reaction is like chaos, so I've had to learn, I had to learn, but fortunately, there's a bunch of people that have done all this ahead of me. So they've been able to guide me along the path, so with addiction, it's like your best thinking got you here, and I think with betrayed partners, if you're in a relationship, we think this person loves us and they've got our back and all of this, and to have the fracture of this person who said they love me, they still say they love me, has done this and this trauma and betrayal. And so to have your whole world, erupt, so how do you find safety in all of that? And it's little bits at a time, but knowing that, that if you feel like you're in the quicksand, somebody's got a rope and is throwing it out to you going, hey, we got you. So,
and it goes back to what we said, if you can find people that are there, and that's why I love getting women into a group of some type where they're or men who are dealing, with a partner who's got an addiction, that they can meet with other people who are dealing with the same thing. And there's just something comforting about that. And I find that as I work, I work with the women, and that they have such wisdom. And oftentimes they bring to session these really difficult situations. And as we're processing and applying the principles, I'll turn it over, I'll ask the person who's presenting, are you open to feedback, support? What is it you need in this moment? And as the group members come back, they have so many wonderful things to share. So I just want to, support what you said on that, that's really important, and we get into safety seeking. And that's the other thing too, is there's a lot of shame sometimes that can come along with, hey, I get in and I do some pretty bizarre things, and I didn't handle that very well. And we've got to understand that we all want to feel safe. That's that's an important human need. I mean, that's like way up there in importance, is I've got to have some safety. And right now, this relationship I'm in, like you said, the most important relationship possibly in my life, has been fractured, and I don't feel safe. And so we do go into those behaviors. And sometimes it's just our best attempt to make sure that our partner is safe and that I feel secure enough that I can move towards you to connect. So it can be everything from, maybe I scream and I yell, and maybe I've had women come in and say, I never used to cuss before. Now I'm like a sailor, right? And that's just happened with my, all the betrayal that I'm dealing with. And yeah, we understand that can happen. And so we're going to look at the safety seeking and go, okay, how does that serve you? Why did you do that? What were you trying to control? Or how are you hoping it will help you? Let's just talk it through. And maybe there's another way to seek safety that will help you get some of the same results. And so it's a constant work. I wish it was, I tell my clients, I wish it was do this, and then this will happen, and then you'll get to here and here and here, and then everything will get better. And it'll happen really fast. And it doesn't.
No, it's not linear. And I mean, nothing, life isn't linear. I mean, life is not like, my career has always gone, I mean, like nothing, it has, but, I'm grateful for the support and the tools to be able to handle, I mean, I call them speed bumps, and some of them are really big speed bumps, but you know what, like, I really do believe, other than death, but everything is temporary, like if I'm going through a really tough time, I can look back and go, yeah, but back there, that was a really nice time, and there'll be nice times again. And so I just have to be able to tolerate that. You mentioned too, the looking back and how did I not know that, and I often hear from partners that they feel stupid and foolish for, like, how could they not see that? And I'm like, because somebody was highly motivated to manipulate and gaslight and make sure that you didn't, because they're maladaptive coping mechanism was like, I need to do this no matter what. So I'm going to tell you all the lies. And the other thing is you this is your partner. This is the person that you are in a relationship with, that is supposed to have your back. So of course you want to believe, that that's true. So, and the projecting out, I mean, I think that there's moments where looking and going, if you're seeing progress, great. If you're not seeing progress, if it's been a longer period of time, I was talking to someone, and it was like 5 years and it's still all chaotic. And I was like, okay, here's where we are. But let's think, in 5 more years, if this person isn't willing to do anything, what is your plan for you? Now, stay or go, that's completely up to you. But what do you need to do to create those safety, mechanisms for you? What do you need to have boundaries that will keep you and connect you with other people? So I think it's okay to look a little bit to the future and go, what, if I don't want to be like this, like Groundhog Day,
Right. I like that. I like preparing in the moment for what's ahead for me in the future. And that's such a great perspective. What I love is when I see the women I work with, all of a sudden it's like they get to this point where they go, you know what? I realize now that I have so many skills and tools. I'm in a different place now. And so I know I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I'm going to be okay, regardless of whether or not my partner is choosing sobriety, right? And recovery and all the components of that I can handle whatever comes. And it takes a lot of work, I'm not going to lie, to get there. It does. But you can get there. And that's the hope I try to give to the women as they come in and they're working on the betrayal trauma, because I see it.
I do too. Yeah. And I really believe that betrayed partners are incredibly resilient. They are weathering massive storms, and hurricane force storms, and they're coming out and they're stronger. They're a little battered and beaten maybe, but the other thing is I see them coming out of the storm, and the more they're connected with other other people, they really are able to move
Mhm.
forward in a different way. So I mentioned to Debbie before we started the recording, but the prodependence.org has 12-step meetings, and there are
Yeah.
people that were joining in on the prodependence. They as participants, aligned with prodependence. And I got word recently that a group of them, and it's women, are traveling together. They're meeting from all over, and there's this group of people that are meeting because they've been friends virtually and by phone and text, and now they're going to take the opportunity to meet with each other. And my heart warmed with that, because I was like, wow, that's really leaning into to the support, being there for other people, but getting support from others as well. So
Mhm. I love that. It's really important. I know that when I was dealing with all of my stuff 20 years ago, I didn't know who to turn to, right? And so for a long time, I really isolated. I really did, thinking, oh, I can handle this, I can handle this. And then there got a point where I just went, no, I can't do this anymore. And I found the more that I reached out, and I had to carefully choose, right? Those who I would reach out to and let them know what I was dealing with, that I found that actually my shame around everything actually reduced as I created that connection. And I found my friends that I could go to for certain things. Like I had a friend that I put her on notice that, okay, when I'm not looking at things really logically, you're going to be my logical friend. And I give you permission, to tell me what I need to do. Another friend who had so much empathy, right? And I'd go to her because she'd go down there in those hard feelings with me.
mm.
And other friends who would just sit and listen because I needed to talk. And so I love the fact the more we can connect, the quicker we're going to heal. And I know a lot of people are very resistant to that. And one of them is that, gosh, I can't go and tell, my partner's story. They're the addict. I can't tell their story. And I do think that it's healthy to sit down as a partnership, a couple, to decide, okay, who are the safe people that we can share our story with, and to let them know I need support, and that here's who I've identified as those healthy people, or that healthy person, that I can share some of the more of the details of what I'm dealing with. And hopefully you can be grounded enough, and we're going to talk about that in the future. How do I take myself when I'm really, really activated, and how can I ground myself and have a difficult conversation, with my addict partner. And so I do think it's really important. And the funny thing is a lot of the women, the ironic thing, I should say, it's not funny, but the ironic thing is that a lot of these women will reach out to a friend only to find out that that friend has dealt with some of the same issues in their relationship.
Yeah, it's far more prevalent, but I think the shame and the shame is useless, but the shame
Mhm.
that partners take on, it's just it's so hard, because
Mhm.
it's his actions, not yours. You
Mhm.
didn't do anything to
Right.
cause his, and
Right.
it's predates you. It's just one of those,
Mhm.
this is how it's coming out. But whether it's like you
Mhm.
said, it's chemicals, it's sex, porn, love,
Mhm.
it's gaming, it
Right.
gambling, food, whatever the acting out behavior is, it's still,
Right.
I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they're like, how can sex addiction not be about sex? And I'm like, it's about escape, it's about numbing out, it's about it,
Mhm.
whether it's eating a chocolate cake, it's eating a
Mhm.
or I mean gaming, it's whatever it is to numb out, escape.
Mhm.
It's because I can't tolerate those uncomfortable feelings, I can't tolerate
Mhm.
the vulnerability,
Right.
so transactional something is easier,
Yes.
than being in
And
a
dealing with
connection
the
with you.
distressing, right, those distressing deep emotions, that pain, that emotional pain that we feel. And again, there's a part of our brain when we're having really, really hard and difficult emotions, there's actually a part of our brain that starts firing, and it translates into physical pain in the body. And as human beings, we don't like pain. We will do whatever we can to avoid pain. And unfortunately, people learn to attach to the wrong things, right? To help comfort and to help us manage the pain. So instead of attaching to another human being and that healthy attachment, we attach to other things to help us numb out or push away, ignore whatever we need to in that moment so we feel better.
temporarily feel better.
Rarely feel
Yeah,
better.
yeah,
Thank
and
you.
recovery is about,
Mhm.
overall feeling, like able. Dr. Rob has used, and I really like this. He said it's like seeing the world in Technicolor. So when you get in recovery, otherwise
Mhm.
it's the black and whites and grays, and it's
Mhm.
drab, and the ability to really see things,
Mhm.
in Technicolor, is what the gift of
Mhm.
recovery is. We aren't just head
Absolutely.
down focused on I need to act out, I need to act out. We're able to see the
Yes.
world and see people, look people in the eye, because we're not dealing with just shame of, if they really knew who I was. So
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And so I think one of the takeaways that I think that, like you said, when we're in crisis or we're in the middle of an addiction or whatever it is, our heads are down a lot more. And eventually we're going to be able to look up and see life a more technicolor. And I often, say to myself and other people, I don't ever want to go through what I went through before. Not at all. But I'm so grateful for where I'm at today and that process that I went through that got me to a different place.
yeah, I no, I earned every good thing in my recovery at this point, because
Yes.
I mean, it was a lot, and I put people through a lot, and you know I'm grateful that I was able to to restore, actually have better relationships than I ever could have had. I
Mhm.
mean, that I didn't know how. So
Right.
recovery gave me that option. So we
Right.
have questions. So this
Okay.
is so let's my husband is a sex addict. D-Day was 4 months ago because of STIs. So I'm so sorry. Till that day I thought I was happily married and my husband was the best man in the world. Staggered disclosure about him seeing prostitutes and other women for sex for 2 to 8 times a month, long before, during, and our entire 8 years of us together. And he was checking sex websites daily, like the news. He is in recovery for almost 4 months now, says he is abstinent for almost 4 months, said that he realized only in the last 3 weeks how awful my trauma is and how awful it is what he was doing. Therapeutic disclosure is about 3 weeks, and he's terrified, saying that there will be much more awful stuff
Yeah.
in there than what he already disclosed. I am still treating my health issues caused by him. My question is, I am stuck. I can only imagine my existence in that relationship with that man that I was imagining for all those years. I know that this is not real, but I feel emptiness in any other way to live.
Mhm. Um, that's a lot. I do want to validate the fact that all of that information that came so quickly, you know, um, really throws you because the world you knew has been turned upside down. And it's really hard to know what's true and what's not true. And so I want to offer a couple of things. And that is, first of all, I know right now it probably doesn't feel like doing the work is helping you move forward, but eventually it will. And the disclosure, I tell my clients, I want them to make sure that when we go into disclosure, because disclosure can really help you learn to process, but making sure that you have all the tools, the skills that you need, and especially the emotional regulation. And what do I mean by that? I mean that I can hear hard things and it's going to be hard and I'm going to get dysregulated, meaning I'm going to be outside my window of tolerance. And can I get back into it? And can I then process it? So, I'm assuming you've got a good therapist, because if your partner's in recovery, I'm hoping that you are too, as well, because that support of that therapist can also help you kind of co regulate some of this. Um, a lot of it is having to come to terms with and understanding why your partner did the extensive acting out that they did. And so a lot of times it's understanding addiction itself a little more. And I'm hoping that you've kind of understood what leads somebody into that. And also why an addict, keeps everything so hidden and how you can miss it because they're good. And that's one of the things we've already made reference to. And that is, if an addict's going to want to hide something, they're good at hiding it. They know how. They can figure their way around anything. And so oftentimes partners will kind of beat themselves up going, how did I not see this? Where was I at? And then, like you said, now I'm dealing with the reality of the fact that how could I be with somebody who's not been truthful, who went to such extent to hide this? I don't even know who they are. So it's going to be a process, and it's a rebuilding process. And trust takes a significant amount of time to rebuild. It does. And we tell our clients in our program that, plan on a 3 to 5 year process, which sounds so overwhelming. However, you're not going to feel as bad as you do right now for 3 to 5 years. And it's little steps, baby steps. And again, I would encourage you, if you're feeling stuck, reach out to people who will help you in that moment process it when you're feeling stuck. So your therapist, a friend who is healthy and doesn't join in talking about, how bad the addict is and how they hurt you and harmed you and they're terrible and awful. And, Brene Brown calls that common enemy intimacy. And we talk about that all the time in our groups. And that is, yes, let's talk about the hurt and the pain and what your experience is. And let's talk about how can we work with that without having to beat up and bash and trash the addict, because they're in their own pain, just like you are. So I want you to know that sometimes feeling stuck, we do feel that way. So how do we get unstuck? I think it's reaching out to people who can support you. I think it goes back to basics once again. It goes back to get into some of those things that can help you emotionally regulate, increase that window of tolerance, and then really start preparing for disclosure. Make sure you're really prepared for disclosure. That's really important. And so I will work sometimes with some of my individual clients for several months, and they might be 6 months into when they just had the discovery or the disclosure, the initial big one, before we get into having a therapeutic formal disclosure. So there's a challenge there. And let's talk a little bit about that with disclosure too. And I do see people regulate. I see women, if they're prepared, they've got the skills and tools, that I will see them after a disclosure, a formal disclosure that we call therapeutic or healing. If it's done properly, they will end up dramatically improving once we get them through that. And so their challenge is, I'm going to hear hard things. Can I stay regulated? Do I have a self-care plan in place, not only now in the weeks and days leading up to disclosure, but while I'm in disclosure? What am I going to do? And that's where your therapist will be there to help support you and guide you and be your advocate. That's what I tell my clients. I'm here to support you and advocate for you. And part of that disclosure process is not only am I hearing about, and the addict partner is taking accountability for everything that they've done, all of their acting out, I also have the opportunity to ask questions. So remember all of the crazy things in my mind about the past and the future, right? Some of these questions can help me address some of that. So I find that helps to get you unstuck, because, right, we get stuck in things like even safety seeking. And I find my clients can finally step out of some of the more dramatic safety seeking and step into healthier safety seeking once they've had the disclosure. So then the other part that's a challenge for the partner is, okay, recovering from it, right? When I leave there, having the support, because we're going to reestablish connection. As I sit in disclosure with the addict partner and the betrayed partner, I tell them that we're honoring you in this space, right? You're sharing hard things. For the addict, it's, I'm pushing through the shame that I've had that's kept me, right, in some of these addictive patterns. I'm sharing my pain. I'm sharing what I've done. And then for the betrayed partner, it's having to sit there and hear hard things and stay regulated. But there's something about, once all the cards are out on the table, once there is nothing more that my mind think might have happened, or once I know what I believe is the truth in that moment, then I can start to heal. Now, where I work, we recommend that they follow it up with Polygraph. And every agency is different. Many therapists think differently about that. But I have found with my partners that within about a week or two of disclosure, if they do the polygraph, then they know, okay, they were truthful. Then there's just something about, okay, now I know who I'm dealing with. Now I know who my partner really is. And then that's where you get to go back and work with your individual therapy and kind of working through that, because there can be some trauma from that. In fact, it was a number of years post all of my, betrayal, that all of a sudden one day I woke up and realized I think I had PTSD, you know, and it hadn't dawned on me. And all the work I had done in that one day, this was several years post all of the really intensive therapy, that I finally recognized I had PTSD. And so trauma can help us feel stuck. Being kind of in a state of PTSD, we feel stuck. We can even feel stuck because we're kind of stuck in that limbic part of our system. So I kind of use my hand as a brain. That's why I used my hand just now, right? The front part of my brain is a prefrontal cortex, and I'm not there. I'm stuck here back in that mid-back part of my brain called the limbic system. And so we do have that feeling of stuck. And so going through and kind of putting all the cards out on the table can help us get unstuck. So we know what we're dealing with. We can work through the trauma. We can deal with if it's PTSD. And then, of course, we can learn all sorts of other things like the boundaries that will help us feel unstuck. And we can start working together as a couple, right? And working through it and coming to, in that therapeutic setting as a couple, working on reestablishing connection. So those are just some things off the top of my head.
No, and I appreciate that.
Any follow-up questions on that you might have on getting unstuck?
Well, and I was very keyed into, you mentioned the partner being very prepared and supported. So, there are therapists who, on behalf of the partner, have delayed the disclosure because the partner wasn't in a place ready to hear that. So please hear that it doesn't have to happen in 3 weeks. It has to happen when the two of you, according to your therapist, are ready for all of this. What I'd really like is for him to not be going, and it's going to be worse than you think. I mean, that feels like, I feel like he's trying to get you, to goad you into saying, well, what's on it? So I know. And so he needs to go get support. Of course, he's terrified that, for all of this. That's for him, his therapist, his 12-step group. That's for him to go deal with. You don't have to support him in that. And of course, you're grieving the loss of the relationship you thought you had. One of the things on that Couples Healing from Betrayal workshop that we talk about is grieving the loss of the relationship that you thought you had, grieving the loss of the husband. You said, I thought I was happily married and he was the best man in the world. And then there's this, I was thinking there's this Stockdale paradox. And there's a longer story, but the bottom premise is, this was a concentration camp, anyway, I'll get the story wrong, but the point is you have to understand how bad it is, but also have hope for the future. And so his addiction predates you. So hopefully part of your brain up here, you can go, this isn't me, this is him. He has some woundedness. He's working on getting things different. He is trying. I'm going to note that, like you said, he's in recovery for 4 months. I really see he's been if he really is abstinent, he's been abstinent for 4 months, because recovery is, what Debbie was talking about, the 3 to 5 years, it's a journey, and you start seeing things. So it takes more time to get the skills to be able to be in recovery. It's abstinence first, and then, you start seeing some things. I call that sobriety. So now we're working on some things, but recovery is a lifelong journey. And so if he's not doing the behaviors, that's, at 4 months, great. If he's, starting to do some, yes, thank you. POW camp. That's what I was, not concentration camp. I was trying to think POW camp, and it wasn't coming to my executive part of my brain. But there are grief support groups. I've mentioned this before. Sophia Caudle, who has done a podcast with Dr. Rob on sex, love, and addiction, also did, she's got 2 groups on www.intherooms.com, and it's grief support. It's, it's a place to, to talk about the grief of, here's this man, but he also, he still can be the best man in the world. So he's broken, he's getting some help. So I'm actually hopeful, you guys are doing, things right. but the other thing is, if he's only seeing his therapist once a week, I don't care how great the therapist is, that isn't enough. So if he's really leaning into, he's daily connected to, we've got a work group that starts tomorrow, the Sex Addiction 101 work group. That's the psychoeducation that you don't get in therapy, but it's the psychoeducation to get the tools, for a foundation of recovery. Great class. We run those every month. Good stuff. Seekingintegrity.com. And I'm going to disagree with Debbie on the polygraph. I hear too many horror stories of, I believe you and your group do a good job, but I know, there are YouTube videos on how to get through a polygraph. You can get the wrong blackmailing people who really, I believe, were truthful and failed. And the Polygraph Association is there's no protocol on how to do a polygraph with disclosure. And the other thing is, the Polygraph organization was coming out with, you can't ask, have you been completely truthful on all this, which are typical questions that get asked on that, and they said those are unethical. So there's a lot.
There is, like I said, some people agree, some people don't. There is a lot of controversy. And so
they can be like a coin toss. And if what,
so I would trust.
What are you going to do? What are you going to do if he passes? Are you going to believe it? What are you going to do if he fails? Are you going to believe it? So have that information. So, and
trust your therapist, because your therapist has done this. They know what
if your therapist has done this. Yes.
If your therapist is specialized in this area.
Thank you.
And they recognize and they understand these types of addictions. They understand, because you have to be trained in doing a therapeutic formal healing disclosure. You have to. There's certain steps. There's, we go through extensive certification we don't just, start doing, disclosures. And I found that disclosure done too soon creates more problems than it does creating more healing.
Yes.
And so we have to be very careful. And there's times that I've had to go back and be part of cleaning up a disclosure that was done the wrong way.
Yes.
And that
I hear about all of those. I every week, multiple, or I'm on my 5th disclosure because he hasn't stopped the behavior yet. So there's really no point if he's, if he's still doing everything, you're just going to, be on that merry-go-round, and that's terrible for partners. So,
and let's talk about another thing too. Your partner's actions post-disclosure are going to let you know if they're being truthful. You're going to see a shift. And that's what I have seen. My partners have reported back to me, right? You're going to see them, their shame reduced. You're going to see them being more honest about little things. You're going to see that consistency. You're going to see them being more boundaried in the appropriate ways. You're going to see them going to their groups consistently. You're going to see them reaching out to their support groups. You're going to see those things that can indicate to you that, yes, they've been truthful. It doesn't take, going to get a polygraph or whatever to make sure that they've been truthful. So I do want to thank you for, challenging me on that, because it's really true. And there are times we go, okay, so, he's not going to do a polygraph. How can we know that there's trust being established? What are you noticing that's different? What has changed? Also, in getting stuck, I want to go back to what you said about grief. Grief can cause us to feel really stuck too. Like you said, I'm grieving the loss of not only what I thought the marriage was, but who I thought the person is. Because we know we go through those different kind of phases or stages of grief. And depression, right? Sadness, depression's one of them, where I feel really shut down, and that can feel kind of like stuck. And
empty, you identify emptiness, of course. And,
absolutely. And so, I work in session with people on, hey, we got to talk about the loss here. We've got to identify it when we talk about, what you're going to move through as you're going through that. Because think about it, you're not only dealing with the crisis of the situation, you're also dealing with grief. And most often it's at the same time.
Yeah. And grief is a process. You can't just shove it in the closet and go, not going to deal with that, because because it, leaks out anyway. But, it's partners, like I said, resilient, but man, challenging stuff. STI, coming up on disclosure. And honestly, I really hope you say, I don't want to talk about disclosure. I'm talking to my therapist. You talk to your therapist. Don't tell me that I'm going to learn, don't want to talk about it, set up a healthy boundary for you that's what we're going to do with our therapist. Don't tell me anything.
Right.
So,
right. Because you might think that getting unstuck means I'm going to get him to tell me exactly what we're going to be talking about in disclosure. So then I'm ready and prepared for it. And it doesn't do you good. It doesn't.
No.
It's just going to activate your system more. You're going to just be in crisis again. You're going to not feel good or settled. And so it's really tempting. I know one of those safety seeking behaviors we want to get into at times is, I need to know it now. I can't wait. I need to know it now.
And I want all the gory details, and then you can't unhear or unsee them. And I hate when people, find things on phone and because that's the stuff that's stuck in their brain. With a good disclosure, with a therapist, you're going to hear you're going to hear the information that you need, but not the gory details that will add more trauma to your to your psyche. I want people to find the healing path. I don't want them to have to come from a deeper hole than they already were in, because the poor partner is more traumatized by I call it vomit disclosure, when when the addict's going, here, I need to tell you this, oh, I feel better. I feel better now. But the poor partner is sitting there going, what just happened? And I have the stench on me and you feel better.
Yeah. I had a client just generally share that, my partner comes home, they've had a slip when they've been out of town, I'm asleep, and they come home and wake me up and tell me about the slip. And then he goes to sleep and he's snoozing away, and I'm up all night thinking it through. And, it's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse, right? It's kind of that same idea.
Yeah, it's so not fair. So
go journal about it.
Yes.
If you're having a hard time, I tell my clients, get it out of your body. If you're stuck, sit down and journal. Where do I feel stuck? Journal and get it out of your body and write, what is it about my partner that I'm just so sad about, right? And here, I don't even know this man, and here's what I thought he was, and here's my reality. And I do work with clients in a session oftentimes of just owning your own reality. And I love Vicki Tidwell Palmer's book, Moving Beyond Betrayal. And that's a section she has in there that really resonated with me, that oftentimes I will sit down and work in session. Okay, let's own your reality, and let's grieve, the fact that who you're married to isn't who you really, who you think you really knew, right? Everything's kind of shifted and changed. And can we look at the good parts, right? Can we look at, okay, what is it about him that is the same?
Yes.
What is it about your relationship that is intact, that can create that sense of safety for you and help you to feel a little more unstuck?
Great stuff. And Harriet Hunter did a webinar with us one time, and there's research on journaling. So if you aren't familiar with journaling, she even runs classes on how to do it. And I love her Miracles of Recovery. She's one of my I have her on Kindle, and so she's one of my daily meditations, and it's great. All of her meditations came out of her journaling. And that's how therapeutic it was. And it's won awards, it's really good stuff. But my point is, if you don't know how to journal and you want a little, primer on it, Harriet Hunter did that on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. Under the resource tab, you'll find previously recorded webinars, and she's in there. But you can always email me, Tammy, TAMI @seekingintegrity.com. This will be posted on that link that I just shared. So lots of resources. Debbie will be back in 2 weeks. Matt will be back. Oh, but Matt will be here with his crazy socks next week. And so
he shows you his socks. Huh?
It's part of the thing now. He has to start with what his socks are. So yes, yeah. So
love it.
So he's the only one, but he does. Yeah. We always ask, show us your socks. And he's fortunately limber enough to be able to do it. So
yes, he is.
Yes. So thank you so much, Debbie. Great job. Thanks to all of you who joined us. Great questions. Keep coming back. There's lots of resources again. So take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.